flow regulation actually occurs. And if we look at that upper 40% of area that's kind of taken care of by those major reservoirs, all of them are operated in a very similar manner. And so what we see is as we come into the winter period or the end of winter, the start of winter, excuse me, reservoirs are full. And so you can see that typically then what occurs is that reservoirs are slowly emptied with the goal of being at a minimum level, a minimum storage volume at the end of winter, at the beginning of spring. So there are a couple elements for that. One of them is that we want to maximize the amount of storage that's going to be available in the spring when the spring freshet begins. The second element is that over that winter period, then that water that's being taken out of storage is used to supplement flow through hydropower installations. And so Ontario Power Generation, Hydro-Quebec are generating power from that water. And so that's what's keeping our lights on and keeping our houses warm over that overwinter period where essentially demand is its highest. Many times people assume that there's that these two things are at odds. But typically, because the demand is highest in the winter and then falls once we reach the spring period, it's in everybody's best interest to make sure that that water is kind of fully utilized during the winter period when it's needed the most. And then we see typically as we have the spring melt, levels rise. Typically, we reach then a full capacity, and most reservoirs are held at a fairly constant level throughout the summer period. And then we can at times see a bit of a rebound in the fall when we have those fall rainfall events. And then the cycle begins again. Looking at the basin overall, we've should be comfortable, I think, with seeing that figure on the right, top right of the hydrologic cycle. And it's not like the reservoir operators, put in an order for I want this much rain this year or this much snowfall. All of us in the system are subject to whatever nature brings us. And so in terms of that, high water events or risk of flooding, there are lots of different inputs. We've of course got snowpack, how fast that snow melts. When does spring occur? An early melt is good. Late melts like 2017, 2019, we can have more difficulty. Large precipitation events, we can't predict those. They come and often without much foreknowledge or a lot of forecasting that's happening ahead. How much rainfall overall on average are we receiving? Lots of these different elements affect how fast, how much water will be running off, and our direct influence on when flooding will occur, how much or how high that flooding perhaps may happen. This is a figure that attempts to capture the overall use of storage within the Ottawa River Basin. And so what you can see then is that this is storage in billions of cubic meters. And if we look then, what happens much as that earlier graphic, the reservoirs are emptied every year. All of those reservoirs together are emptied in preparation for spring. And we can see that the overall range of storage, that green band, essentially empty to full every year, is approximately 8 billion cubic meters. We can see we've got a couple example years. We've got 2019 where we were plenty low and we were waiting for spring to begin, as I described, a late spring. And then we had very strong snowmelt runoff. We had very large rainfall events. That reservoir system was filled very quickly within a matter of weeks. We can compare that to this year, 2021, where our spring began very early this year. Our snowpack was about average this year, but because of the warm temperatures and no precipitation, a lot of that essentially evaporated or went up into the atmosphere in what we term sublimation. And so there was a lack of refill on our reservoirs. So if we look at our overall reservoir storage currently, we're much below normal. Many of the reservoirs, such as the Basketong, are struggling to refill because there wasn't enough snowmelt runoff to refill them. Now, there are limits to that flow regulation. We have a very large basin, but because we don't know what every year will bring, we're very limited. Our reservoir storage stays the same year after year. But one thing that it does every year, and that's what this graphic tries to capture, is that the peaks that we see throughout the basin are always reduced. And we see every year that those reservoirs are emptied and then they're filled. Now we've seen, those extreme events of 2017, 2019. And whereas this historic, these images are from 1928. Just kind of qualitatively, if you were to compare that from a picture of 2017 or 2019, it's essentially very similar. This is actually the Champlain Bridge, and you can see that the approach to the Champlain Bridge at that time was flooded. Now I think they've raised it because they know that it's susceptible to flooding. But we can have a look at the historic record for our basin. Now this is the period of record that we have beginning in 1900. And we can go back and look that periodically throughout that last 120 years, we've had major flood events. We can see 1907, 1928, 1950. There's that pair of high water events that I described in the 70s. But then we have this period where we had really what we would term pretty quiet hydrologic conditions. And that, of course, has been the period where most of the properties, most of the buildup along our major rivers and tributaries have occurred. Many of the cottages that were existing on those systems have been converted to primary residences. So that's part of the difficulty, is that this encroachment in the floodplain, because we know it's very desirable to live close to water. We love, our water systems, but there are, of course, dangers in living on the floodplain, perhaps things that people were not aware of. But we can absolutely acknowledge that 2017, 2019 are the largest events that we've seen in the recorded history of the basin. Now, this is a graphic that's going to attempt to describe the use of storage and kind of compare it to the overall runoff in the system. Now, this is in an average year. An average year, again, that storage is about 8 billion cubic meters. The outlet would see about 16 billion cubic meters on an average year. In a year like 2017, wow, we've got, three and a half times the storage. But what we observe, of course, is that the storage in those reservoirs is constant. Even if we have a large flood event, empty is empty and full is full. Even a year like 2019, record year in terms of overall volume of water that flowed through the system, almost 4 times that 8 billion cubic meters. It's just that there's a certain limitation on how much storage we have, but how much water actually flows through the system. Another element to our basin is, I'm going to kind of return to that idea of controlled versus uncontrolled. And this is a graphic that illustrates at the peak of discharge from the system, almost all of the waters, or a large portion of the water, is coming from those uncontrolled areas. So we can see that discharge is held to a minimum in the reservoir system, holding back as much water as they can. But what's happening is that snowmelt runoff, precipitation runoff from those uncontrolled tributaries essentially is causing extreme flooding throughout the system. I'm kind of returning then once again to the graphic, and this is for 2019. And this is comparing again the effect of reservoir storage. And so because we have reservoirs, we have this effect where overwinter flow is higher because they're emptying the reservoirs. And so we see then that blue line, the amount of water that we see coming out of the reservoirs is higher than what we calculate would have occurred naturally. But then conversely, when we get into that spring period where we've got a peak in runoff, we see that we approximately 4,000 to 5,000 cubic meters of potential flow was reduced or prevented from going through the system by storing it in the reservoirs. And we see that typical double peak that we observe on the river. And even the second peak was reduced by about 3,000 cubic meters. Now this is that same graphic, but like just turning our gaze directly on the Gatineau. And so the effect of the Kabanga and the Basketong reservoirs being at the headwaters of the Gatineau, approximately it's 84% actually at the peak 84% of the flow that's coming out of the Gatineau River was directly from local tributaries, essentially from the Maniwaki all the way down to the confluence with the Ottawa River. So you can see a major contribution, but unfortunately we can't prevent flooding. Flooding's minimized by the presence of those reservoirs, but can't be eliminated. This isn't from 2019, but it's from last year. And you can see that this is for the Gatineau River itself, that even on the Gatineau River, we've got a substantial reduction in the peak flow that you would have observed. At over 18,000 cubic meters per second, that reduction essentially, without the reservoir system, you would have been as high as you would have observed in 2019. Now, one of the effects that you observe on the Gatineau and we see on the Ottawa is this effect where we have areas of the river that are lower than we would observe normally. And people often question, is this mismanagement? What's going on? And this speaks a bit to the types of structures on the river. And so we've got these structures, those reservoirs that are in the north, such as Kabanga and Basketong. But then we have what we term run-of-river dams. And so Paugang would be one of those, Chelsea, Rapid Farmers. These would be considered run-of-river dams where there's no significant storage that's associated. And so operationally, what these dams do is that they lower their head pond levels, the levels directly above their dams, to ensure that they in no way make flooding worse. Now, one of those pictures that I showed you was of Lac Saint-Madie, and the head pond level or the level above Paugang has a direct influence on that area. And so because flows were very high in 2019, and you can see normally in that green band, it's not required to lower levels that significantly for the Paugang Dam. But 2019, it was necessary to go significantly lower. And so what then you see is that levels decrease in the area of the Lac Saint-Madie, but this is to ensure that there isn't further flooding upriver on the Gatineau itself. Similarly, you can see that the Chelsea Dam lowers its head pond level, and this is 3 different panels or photographs taken at different flows. And as the flow goes higher, they continue to decrease their level to ensure then that they in no way make flooding worse upstream. And so essentially this is a narrowing or a shallow area that's at just below Farm Point. And this is the control point. And you can see that at very high flows, it's essentially exposing those natural rapids that would have been visible before the building of those dam structures. And so what's happening then is that flood levels that are occurring in Wakefield up through essentially to the Paugang Dam are what would have occurred naturally. And we use this line, you could remove the dam, you could remove the Chelsea Dam, and upstream flooding would essentially be unchanged. Now, just a quick look at current conditions. Upstream in Baskatong, Baskatong's currently about 2 meters below what would be considered a normal summer level. So they're struggling to kind of get back to what they consider an optimal recreational level. There'll be lots of struggles for guides and outfitters or those who use the Baskatong Reservoir recreationally. This has occurred before in other years. Years such as 2010 was even lower, I think, but it'll be a struggle for many. And we can see then that it's also reflected on the rest of the river, where we've got essentially you're bouncing along just about minimum historic flows along the length of the Gatineau. And really, that's what we foresee for probably much of the summer, given some more significant rainfall. So I'm just going to leave you with a quick word about communications. I hope most of you are aware of our website, the ottawariver.ca. It's gone through a major renovation in the last year. And this spring, there were some more things that perhaps you'd see as beneficial, especially for the Gatineau. You'll find bulletins there on kind of unfolding conditions. We've got a lot more products that we're trying to make available for basin users. We're going to be publishing 3 times a year river bulletins describing conditions. There's going to be one coming out describing our spring. For you then in the Gatineau specifically, there are a lot of new stations. Wakefield's there, levels at Chelsea, levels at Paugang and flows, a lot of new information. So you can find a lot more for you on the Gatineau on our website. So just quick closing, flooding is a very natural element. We see that our reservoir storage stays the same every year, irrespective of what the total basin volume is. But every year, those peak levels are reduced through the use of that retention of water in those reservoirs. We encourage everybody to know where they can get information. And now that there is additional information on the Gatineau River for you, I encourage you to be checking that out. And be aware that there are lots of different mediums that are out there that present challenges for us, but also great opportunities for better information sharing.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was so informative, and especially some of the situations that happened here on the Gatineau. There were a couple of questions about, but I think you answered them. You know, in 2019, why it was so low in Farm Point and so high in Gatineau, but you pretty much explained that to us. But also, right, this year, I guess, is it just a lack of rainfall, or that's one of the questions. Why is it so low this year? Is basically.
Yep, absolutely. It's a combination of a lack of precipitation. But also, as I say, the snowmelt runoff was a lot lower than anticipated. We had average snowpack, but if you notice this year, we didn't have a significant melt during the winter period, and often that tends to create a denser snowpack. So the snowpack was very light, and so it essentially, a lot of it went up into the atmosphere, and then an ongoing lack of precip. So that's where we are.
And one last question here from Vicky. Why is the river so low in Wakefield and high in Chelsea?
So because, as I say, so there are some benefits to having a dam. And one of them is that those who live immediately above a dam, their level tends to be very stable because the operators of the dam keep it very stable in terms of the head pond level immediately above the dam. But the further then you go upstream, the more the level tends to return to what it would be naturally.
Mm.
Now, every river has what we term a natural slope, and water runs downhill. And the higher the flow, the steeper that slope gets. So under a large flow, say your slope between Wakefield and Chelsea would be in the order of a meter. But under conditions of low flow like they are today, it's essentially a lake all the way from Chelsea up to Wakefield. And so that slope disappears, and it may be just a matter of a few centimeters that makes that slope.
Yeah, these are things that we were all wondering about. That was an excellent presentation, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so happy to hear also about your new information on your website about the Gatineau River, because I think before you only had Maniwaki listed. So I'm very happy to hear that we're going to have more information. So we're going to watch for that on your website. So thanks
Great.
for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Good to be, yeah. So, so I guess next is Ronnie with the water quality report.
Yes, thanks, Michael. That was really, really interesting, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into answering these questions. And so right now, we'd like to give to you just a brief update on our water quality work, which has been for a long time one of the mainstays of our activities as the Friends of the Gatineau River. So we have a short presentation that Steve and Mark and I will be giving. So in essence, why do we monitor water quality? We've been doing that for roughly about 20 years. And we started off because really there was very little public information about water quality on the river for recreational purposes. So in 2000, FOG started to do this. And so far, really, we've been able to build quite an interesting information base and evidence base for the fact that the water quality for recreation is quite good on the river, and it's been like that for quite a while. We still continue to look out for water quality despite these positive results, because there are growing levels of other potential concerns on the river. And these include things like microplastics, pharmaceuticals, fertilizers, and really things that there isn't any public agency monitoring with any kind of consistent basis. We've recently started to look at salt and road salt and the potential impact of that chemical on our waterways. And then because we have a growing population in our area of study, we're concerned about increasing nutrients and other potential threats to water quality from septage and sewage treatments. And lastly, we are interested in the potential impacts of boat traffic, in particularly from the point of view of water quality from the spread of, for potential threat of spreading invasive species. I will say that our work right now really is focused on really two main aspects of threat to the river, but we don't, there's other things that could potentially influence water quality, but that we don't measure really at this point because of capacity constraints. But we hope to increase our sampling efforts in the future. So typically we measure after 2 days of rain-free activity, meaning, and that's to essentially to conform with water quality standards that have been issued by the province of Quebec. Other things that I mentioned that we could be measuring include blue-green algae, which is an exotic species of concern, or potential species of concern, pharmaceuticals and other pollutants we could also be looking at, but don't presently. And then, so as I mentioned, the main thing that we analyze from the point of view of recreational water quality is fecal coliform. So, and that's essentially measuring a bacteria called E. coli. that an E. coli exists in really all warm-blooded animals, including ourselves, but it's a good indicator of other bacterial activity in the river. And so 3 times a summer, we go to about 15 different sites on the river, and following the protocol from the Ministry of Quebec, we take water quality samples and have them analyzed in a lab and present those bacterial coliform results according to the provincial standards. We do some sampling right now for nutrients, so for nitrogen and phosphorus, which are important to keep an eye on from the point of view of what's called eutrophication, i.e. high levels of nutrients in the river that can bring along some bad water quality issues. And lastly, we do a lot of water quality sampling for physical variables of the water. This includes its temperature, its dissolved oxygen, and other
Ce qui concerne la température, la quantité d'oxygène, la conductivité de l'eau et les solides, le niveau de pH, la clarté de l'eau sont tous des indices qui nous renseignent sur la qualité de l'eau. Alors, quelques données là, sur ce que nous avons recueilli en termes de données depuis 2000 à 2020, donc au cours des 20 dernières années. Et si on utilise des couleurs pour vous indiquer quelles sont la qualité de l'eau, on voit bien que
E. coli in the river. And from what we can see from our data is there's basically a general trend downwards. And for the past, I guess, 8 years, we've been hovering in the excellent range for water quality when looking at E. coli. So that's generally a good thing. You can change the slide, Ronnie. So now I'm just going to go into the 3 samplings that we did last year. As Ronnie mentioned, we sample water quality from the river 3 times a year when possible. And we're going to be using the same scales before. So basically the lighter green is the excellent rating. The darker green is good rating. The yellow is acceptable. And I won't even get into the other colors because we haven't seen anything like that, which is good. So the first sampling we did last year was on July 5th, and we did 17 sites that time. And this was from the north of Alcove all the way down to just below the dam in Chelsea. And you can see from the color range here that generally the majority of the samples were in the excellent range and a few were in good. And there was only 1 sample at McClinton Creek, which was in the acceptable range. So that's something we keep a note of, but generally good on that day. And then the second sampling we did here was on August 3rd, using the same scale. Almost all the sites were in the excellent range, which is great to see. And there was only 1 sampling below the dam that was in the acceptable range. So like previous, just something that we make note of. Go to the next one, Ronnie. And then our final sampling of last year was August 31st. And at this time, everything was between excellent and good. So that's really great to see on the river. On to the next one. And this is just a little bit of a summary shown in a table of each water sample in sequence, shown by color and date. So basically what you can see here is overall, the majority of the sites are showing excellent to good fecal coliform counts in the water. And really there was only 2 sample locations that we had that were in the acceptable range, which is overall a really great thing to see in the river. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Good for you, Ronnie.
Thanks. So just a quick word about the nutrients and the salt oxygen parameters we mentioned a little bit earlier. So this limited sampling that we did do, and this happens both in Wakefield Bay and in Horseshoe Bay, the results indicate really that the levels of both nitrogen and phosphorus are below levels of concern, so which is good. And in the terms of dissolved oxygen, which is important for primarily fish life and other aquatic life, the levels of dissolved oxygen were higher than the minimum recommended. So again, good news for water quality and the critters that live in the river. Overall, you know, we can conclude that water quality again is good. There's low fecal contamination in the river, so it remains an excellent place to engage in recreational swimming, etc. Typically, we see a little bit higher levels of fecal contamination in the tributaries, and that's primarily due to the fact that there's just less water for potentially the same amount of fecal chloroform in the river, so that leads to higher concentrations. And I will say that, you know, this type of effort in terms of long-term sampling is very, very important, both to establish a baseline from which to compare future changes. And we should be a little bit proud of ourselves as Friends of the Gatineau River, because I think we have the longest running continuous publicly available data set for water quality. So we hope to continue that for a long time. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, so we did a couple of other things during this year. Over the winter, we participated with the Ottawa Riverkeeper on their road salt monitoring program. Road salt's a bit of an issue because it basically runs from the roads when it melts into creeks and into the river. And basically a level of 120 milligrams per liter of chloride in the stream or river is considered a maximum of what we would like to see. So in a very brief summary of the results from this last winter, in Masham, the La Pêche River has written creek for some reason. That's basically at the entrance to Lac Philippe. Basically everything was really low there. In fact, I had to bore a hole in the ice to get at it. So I don't think there's much road salt going in the river there. Further down at the little bridge just below the Wakefield Mill in the La Pêche River, it was a little higher, but again, still a very good level, well under 120 milligrams, the level of concern. Now, a different story on Cutter Creek in Wakefield. If you don't know, was a new name to me, but it's basically a little creek that runs down parallel to the Valley Drive, what used to be called Valley Drive, and ends up behind the Cafe 1870. And in fact, it's the one that floods sometimes and causes them grief. It basically has much more runoff from the highway. So on 8 out of 19 occasions sampled, 8 of them were over the level of concern. The peak was 580, which is pretty bad. It's not as bad as in Ottawa, but still it's certainly a level of concern. In Meech Creek in Chelsea, at the outlet where the quarry is, basically all the samples there were less than 120 milligrams per liter. So good news there too. Okay, next please. Some other programs we are going to work on, the invasive species. Yeah, we're working with the Ottawa Riverkeeper to come up with a program to this summer, basically do a survey of the river and along the Chelsea part at least, and maybe Wakefield part, La Pêche part too, just to see what there is to be seen. We know there's Eurasian milfoil, which is an invasive species, and there are probably other things too. So we want to learn a bit from Ottawa Riverkeeper what we should be looking for, and then go ahead and try and look for it. The last thing we have done a couple of years ago, last time, was the shoreline survey, where we just basically went along the river in Cantley and Chelsea and La Pêche and tried to identify places where there were boat ramps heading into the river, or basically the buffer between somebody's property and the river being less than 5 meters. And there are quite a number of sites that way. We certainly don't intend to police them, but we just wanted to bring it to the awareness of the municipalities so they can do something about it. It is against regulations, and we are in a program to try and basically emphasize to everybody who lives along the river, what the regulations are. So yeah, that's it for me. Thanks. Oh yes, one more. Yes, thank you to the participants, which are the municipalities. We, with Cantley and La Pêche, pay us for doing the samples. Chelsea pays for their own samples, but we basically use their equipment and take the samples for them. And then the clubs, the Gatineau River Yacht Club, Cascades Club, and Alcove pay us for sampling, and also various people at times have loaned us boats, and the Ottawa Riverkeeper has always been very helpful to us. So thanks.
I guess it's my turn to do the, thanks you guys for the report. I didn't know that we had the longest serving repository of data. So that's something to be proud of. Thank you. And if anyone, there are a few questions. So I'm just wondering if we should answer those, or for example, there's one question: are there water quality kits on the water for that waterfront owners could do additional sampling? So does one of you want to answer that?
Sure, I was just typing out
Okay.
an answer into the question and to the answer function here.
Okay, so you're going to type it in?
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I can answer it now. We don't have sampling kits available, but we can put you in touch with the right people who could provide that for you.
Mm-hmm.
So please be in touch, and we'll hook you up.
Okay, I'm just wondering, since we're at the halfway mark, perhaps this is the time to take our little 5-minute break, and just stretch and go to the bathroom and so on, and then I can, in 5 minutes, we'll be back to continue with the president's report. In the meantime, Ronnie, if you want, I could do the video.
Sure, that'd be great.
But I need the remote control.
Okay.
So we'll be back at 8:06. Oh, I need to scroll a bit. Oops. Shit. Well, that's just as bad, isn't it?
Le peuple anishinaabe, qui vit dans son bassin versant depuis des siècles en harmonie avec la nature, l'appelle Ténégadine Siri. Le bassin versant de la Gatineau est situé sur le territoire non cédé et non abandonné de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. La rivière Gatineau s'étend sur environ 400 km du réservoir Mascatone à la ville de Gatineau, où elle se jette dans la rivière des Outaouais. Son bassin versant couvre 40 254 km² et comprend plus de 50 ruisseaux et rivières, ainsi que 19 000 lacs qui sont interconnectés. En toute saison, c'est l'une des plus belles rivières du pays, avec ses îles, ses forêts du bouclier canadien et ses paysages à couper le souffle. Des arbres à feuilles caduques, dont beaucoup sont des chênes et des érables, qui se trouvent plus haut sur les pentes de la Gatineau. L'automne venu.
Ronnie, I don't think it's really working. I don't know. The sound is not working, so we might as well just turn that off. There's no sound. So Ronnie, maybe you could just, do I have remote control now? You could just give me remote control. Would that need? I don't know. Okay, so I guess we're back. Sorry about that. We were going to proudly display the videos that were done by Adam Trottier at Debonair Drone, who volunteered his time with his drone to set up this video for us. But they are on the home page of our website. So if you want to go watch them, they are there. So I think I will start my presentation. We'll just go back up to the President's report. All right, so whoops, there's a little bit of a delay.
Here we go. Stop there, Rita.
Okay, yeah, it's just that, okay, the screen reacts a few seconds after you press the button. So I just thought that I would share with our members and followers some of the things that we did over the last 2 years since our last AGM. And at our last AGM, we presented our strategic plan. And what I did here is I extracted some of our strategic objectives and just created a scorecard of what we did. So I just thought I'd quickly mention some of these things. So obviously we continued our water quality monitoring, but we also expanded our geographical scope. So we moved farther south into between the dams and south of the Chelsea Dam. And this year we're planning to also expand north towards Low. So that's why we scored green. We're also expanding our repertoire, as Ronnie and Stephen and Mark were talking about. We're now getting into we got into the salt study and the invasive species and so on. So we feel like we're going to be expanding our repertoire and also fortifying our database and possibly making it public. So that's on the monitor side. On the educate program, we expanded our outreach. So for example, we are currently working on a awareness campaign for shoreline protection with La Pêche, and delivered a brochure and workshops and so on. We've had multiple series of articles in the Lowdown, and we continue to educate people through Facebook and our newsletter. So the one thing that we didn't do is some of the learning via BioBlitz, and we wanted to also reach out to younger people at schools. So we were not able to do that with with the capacity that we had. In terms of advocate, there was the pressure municipal governments on regulations. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some of the things we did there in terms of our work with the municipalities. Fostering partnerships and alliances. We've been working with Ottawa Riverkeeper, ABV des Sept, which is the Quebec Provincial Water Basin Organization. And we also created a group called the, what did we call ourselves? The Water Protectors. And it was a coalition of representatives from the Ottawa Riverkeeper, ABV des Sept, ourselves, and the La Page Coalition for a Green New Deal. And because of that coalition, we got the grant for the salt study. So I think we're working well there. The next item in terms of, this is in terms of building our capacity, recruiting volunteers and board members. We put that as yellow because there's always a need for more. As we already mentioned, we need a few more board members, and we definitely need more volunteers. Increased membership and followers, we definitely have increased that, and Patrick is going to tell us some of the numbers later. And of course, continue to celebrate. Now, within the COVID times, it was a little difficult, but we did in the last 2 years at least have 2 get-togethers. One was a Riverfest 2019 and concert, benefit concert. So all in all, I feel very proud of the team and the passion of the volunteers that are with us, and we can always do better. But in the next part of the presentation, we are going to talk about our longer term vision and where we need help. So in terms of just elaborating a little bit on what we've done on the Educate program portion of our program, some of the things we did, we went to the Cantley Eco Citoyen gathering, and we had a kiosk. We also were asked to present. And for those of you that have the presentation of this presentation, the links are live, so you can actually go and see what the presentation was. In March of last year, we were going to have a live event until COVID hit. So we quickly turned it into a webinar on World Water Day. And that's quite was an interesting event. And we have a recording of the webinar that's there. And as I mentioned, we also are currently working on the Shoreline Protection Awareness Project with La Pêche. The brochure is done, so you can, if you want to go have a look at it, it's done. And we are now working on workshops for the public, as well as workshops for municipal employees. We're going to create a series of videos, snippets on different topics on what to do with your shoreline, for example. And of course, our webpage is going to get populated with lots of good info. And there's actually already a whole section there on shoreline protection on our new webpage. Oops, I went too fast. There we go. On the Advocate side, I mentioned that I wanted to tell you a bit of what we've been doing with the municipalities and the MRC. So with La Pêche, we did have a discussion about shoreline development with the mayor. We went out and took him for a boat ride and showed him some of the things that are happening in terms of shoreline degradation. We also took the Cantley Council out for a boat ride. There's a picture of us there. Many of the Cantley councillors had never been on the river, so it was good for them to see what it's like, how beautiful it is, but also some of the risks of the Leda shoreline on the Cantley side and so on. We also, in the summer of, or last summer, we did a virtual meeting presentation with the municipality of Chelsea. So all of the main directors and the mayor. So the presentation is there. We were trying to be proactive about what should happen on the shoreline now that the Chelsea has purchased a lot of the shoreline along here. And some suggestions on what to do with the boat launch and boat access and so on. We were also asked to provide feedback on the new dock bylaw that they were coming out with. And so you can see the feedback there. we've been interacting with them, trying to plead for a boat washing station at the Farm Point boat launch. It didn't happen yet, but we're still pushing for that. And then notably, we also lobbied for a new sign at the Farm Point boat launch, which you see here on the right, to start our awareness program about responsible boating and, you know, river etiquette. So that's supposed to be posted early June, so at the Farm Point boat launch. So that was a nice, successful story there. And then we've also been working with the MRC des Collines. And so we had late March, we had a meeting with the mayors of the MRC to talk about security and the health of the river. And they agreed to delegate or partner with FOG on this project. Since the MRC is the actual authority of, in terms of boating regulations, we have to work together. So that resolution was adopted, and we submitted our preliminary assessment form to Transport Canada, and they have acknowledged that this is a valid project, and so that now we start the real work, which will be a series of public consultations, as well as data gathering for this summer. The first public consultation will be to discuss non-regulatory options. So what can we do without changing any regulations? And so that is scheduled for June 21st. So mark your calendars. If you, we would like to invite as many people as possible to come and participate in that presentation, or in that, sorry, consultation. So, and then, sorry. Oh my goodness. There we go. So the last, you know, tenet of our programs are the Celebrate. And like I said, this year was difficult because of COVID, but in 2019, we had you know, the biggest River Fest yet. Lots of activities, bands, flotilla, and so on. It was fantastic. And as well, we had a fundraising event at the Black Sheep, which was thanks to the band called Waked Up. They donated their time to raise funds for us. So that's it for me. There are a few more topics in terms of our capacity, or the FOG capacity, but I'm going to pass the speaker over to Patrick Henry. We'll talk to us about it.
Thank you, Rita. So if you want to do the slide advancing, we can stay on this one. But first off, I've got 4 quick slides focused on capacity. And capacity is really about the intersection of money and people, and in our case, volunteers. We've got a lot of good news for our organization, and I'd like to actually thank Rita as our new president for leading the charge on a lot of new initiatives in energy, and we've got a lot of exciting things on the go. So first off, charitable status. We recently received charitable status October 7th, 2020. And what that means is that we can now issue tax receipts for eligible donations. You can donate to Friends of the Gatineau River on our website, and you can see the website on the screen there. There's an online platform, which is through canadahelps.org. It's a secure online platform. It's very user-friendly. You can also donate by check. And if you have questions or a large donation, we would encourage you to reach out and chat with us first. And of course, we've had incredible support throughout all the years, and we definitely appreciate that. It's so important for the work we do, and we look forward to hearing from you. And one thing to recognize in terms of the next slide, if you could advance there, Rita, is that In terms of FOG membership, the way that we operate is that if you go to that online giving platform that I just mentioned on our website, if you donate $20 or more, that covers your annual membership for FOG. We'll keep all your information, reach out to you through our e-newsletter, which is also available on the website. We've had a lot of growth in the last couple of years. We currently have 264 people listed as members, but in fact, we're seeing some significant growth in terms of Facebook, from 150 people to 1,100. Our e-news recipients have gone from 250 to 850. So there are a lot of people showing a lot of interest in the work that we're doing and the issues that we're focusing on, and we encourage you to get engaged. Rita, you mentioned earlier on about the new website that we have. We're not going to jump over to it now, just in terms of technical fun logistics to do that, but anything that I'm talking about, if it goes in one ear out the other, just go to the website and you will access all of this information in terms of membership, volunteer, board of directors, etc. If you go next slide, Rita, please. So the next slide is regarding our search to grow our board of directors. We are currently seeking to fill two very important positions, volunteer board of director positions. One is director of outreach and communications, and one is treasurer. So two very different positions, and we hope somebody is out there paying attention to this now. And if you are interested, please reach out to us through the website, and we can discuss what those positions mean and how you can play an important role as FOG builds up and builds our capacity for the next phase. Next slide, thank you. So volunteers, that has always been what Friends of the Gatineau River is about. You'll see just a few names listed here up on the screen that we pulled, and please do not feel badly if you don't see your name there, and it should be, but ultimately all of our work is based on volunteer, and we really hope to see you get involved if you are not already. You'll see a link on the screen that is from our new website in terms of how you can get involved, and there's a specific list of volunteer opportunities that we are looking to recruit for. So again, take a look at the new website, reach out to us and donate. Make sure you have your annual membership, and we hope to see you on the river. Thanks a lot, Rita.
Thanks. Thanks. I'm going to actually bring up that list of volunteer. Oops, did it work? Let's see. Maybe not. I guess I can't go. There it is. No. Doesn't work. Anyways, yeah, so we have a fairly good list of skill sets that we are looking for, but they are available on that link. But at this time also, Ronnie, if you could get Michael Cooper to come and talk to us about some very specific people that we're looking for. Would you be able to promote him to a panelist?
Michael, you should now be part of the panel.
Michael, you just have to unmute yourself. Michael, are you there?
How's that?
Okay, you don't have your camera on?
I do have my camera on, but let me see. Start video. How's that? Does that sound like a?
Yep, there you go. Okay, you got your
Okay, good.
2 minutes of fame.
Well, so for those of you I don't know, I'm one of a trio of grandfathers who sat around last fall at the end of summer, we've all spent a lot of hours enjoying boating on this river. And so we felt a bit of an obligation to help protect and preserve this heritage river. So we're delighted, of course, that there are so many happy boaters, and now know that more than 80% of them are in human-powered craft, non-invasive. But we're concerned about the growth in powerboating, both for environmental reasons and human safety. It's a small and narrowing river, and so congestion is a problem. And so we joined with FOG in the fall to promote, let's call it responsible boating, and to proceed to invite, to ask, Transport Canada to reduce the speed limit, which is currently 55 kilometers an hour. So, as you possibly know by now, the MRC agreed that this was a concern, and they did pass a resolution recently, and we are now, as Rita said, partnered, so that we put in the energy, and they put in the voting. So the request to Transport Canada, which, as you I'm sure know, regulates inland waterways in Canada, we will ask them to modify the vessel operating regulations. To complete this request, we need volunteers to help us. So first, we need to implement an awareness program about this responsible boating campaign. And then we need to be collecting accurate data on boating on the Gatineau River in 2021. So I'm hoping you might have a few hours to donate this summer. We'd be grateful. And if you do, please put your contact data on the website at ontheriver@fogarg.org, and we'll get back to you. We'll have a schedule for volunteers and an explanation of why, what, and how. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks. Yeah, so just get a hold of us. Actually, there's a whole bunch of positions as well on the website that we're looking for help. So just through our website, you can contact us via email and let us know if you want to get involved. So what's next, Ronnie? It doesn't look like I have control anymore.
I'll give up.
I think it's the financial report, no?
Yeah, but I don't know who, are you giving the control to Benta then, Ronnie?
You know, there's just a link. If you want to bring it up on the screen, that's fine. And there we have it. Perfect. So money. What you will see here is the financial report for 2020 and then a forecast for 2021. Under water testing services, you will see that the amount of money that we receive from the municipalities and sports clubs have reduced, as has the expenses. And the reason for that is that we have started to do some composite testing. So we take 3 samples combined into one, and that has reduced our costs quite a bit. The other thing in here too is that we will be doing 3 sites in the low municipality as well, which is new. So stretching the river out. From a fundraising perspective, the assumption is that we will raise as much money as we did in 2020. Ron, if you can scroll down a little bit now, that would be great. You have already heard of the shoreline protection awareness. So that was funded by the Green Fund in La Pêche. And so we have received $6,500 total, but it's costing us $7,835, which is fine because FOG will often do some contribution of funds as well to the various projects. Invasive species, that is a new project as well as of 2021. And again, FOG is contributing some money, and the Chelsea municipality is also giving us some funds. For boating safety, we have already started some of that. It's another project that will be ongoing this year. There is also now a Chelsea Green Fund, and we are considering perhaps asking for some funds from them as well. So the net for the projects then is a deficit of $4,185. We have some general expenses. The one thing to note here is that we're spending more on expenses this year than we did previous years. And the key reason for that has to do with our new website, which I hope you get a chance to check out. So we had total expenses of $13,813, a revenue of $11,238, and we have a deficit of $2,575 for 2021. Now, in terms of the financial position, you may see that there is quite a bit of money in the bank. And so one thing that we are discussing right now is the merit of maybe hiring an executive director. There's a lot of project work and there's a fair amount of activities taking place within the organization, and it may be helpful to have a paid position. So I think that comes to the end of mine.
Great. So now, thank you, Benta, for the overall view. Definitely our financial position is getting better by the year. And again, if we, hopefully we reach our targets for the donations and membership, and that's would be thanks to our followers and other lovers of the river. But also we're going to try to apply for some more grants, perhaps the Chelsea Green Fund and the La Pêche Green Fund. So we'll have to look at that. So now is the time to pass the speaker over to Bob McCallum, who designed the Gatineau River Vision 2030 survey. And it was designed to help us, FOG, direct our priorities and what we should work on. So Bob, I'll just let you take over, and Ronnie, perhaps you can give him the remote. Or
Ronnie could just advance the slides as I go, might be the best.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Rita, and hello, everyone. Before jumping into the results, I just wanted to talk briefly about the objectives of the survey. In addition to gathering community input on important issues related to the river, we saw it as a great opportunity to raise awareness about all sorts of issues. So you probably noticed there were these did you know preamble sections to each question, which provided information. So we thought that was a great opportunity to share some information and to provide some good context for each question. The survey was crafted to build a long-term vision, as Rita mentioned, and the idea was let's put ourselves floating down the river in a nice summer's day in 2030, and what do we see? What's the state of the river and the activity on the river? And so the mindset and the approach to the survey was to craft that vision. And setting a longer term goal like that does a couple of things. It takes away the short term constraints, so we can think freely about what's the utopic view of the river down the road. And it frankly gives us the time that might be needed for some ambitious goals to be met. It might take multiple years to achieve some of these desirable states. So hence the longer term approach, the 2030 approach. And then when we have that vision, we can work backwards to use it to craft projects and set priorities between now and then. So in the next months and years for FOG and other organizations, when it comes time to decide on what to do next and build up a pathway that gets us to that 2030 vision. And it also, one of the objectives was to articulate that vision and show very strong support from the community for that vision, get a consensus vision that would be compelling to local governments to take action. Next slide, please. So first, a huge thanks to everyone who took the time to fill out the survey. I'd also like to congratulate Tammy Scott, who won our draw. So everybody who filled out the survey by June 2nd was entered into a draw, and she won 2 free sup rentals from Paddlefit. So huge thanks to Paddlefit, and congrats again to Tammy. Now, we publicized the survey as broadly as we could. We wanted to track input from all kinds of people and with many different interests in the river, not just the traditional FOG members and supporters. And I think we were quite successful in doing that. And as a result, we received 679 responses, which when you look at it compared to similar surveys by other organizations and local governments, it's a very high response. So people are engaged big time when it comes to the future of the river. And another real evidence of that is that each section had a comment section where people could provide open comments. And in total, we received over 1,200 comments. So we're still going through those, sorting through those. But the results of the survey are also on our website already. And all the comments, once we kind of clean them up and organize them, will be available there as well for people who are interested in digging into that. Now, as you can see, the first results here show that the vast majority of responses came from the residents who live on or very near the river in the major municipalities between the dams, so Chelsea, Lepech, and Cantley. And it's worth noting that we focused the survey on the lower Gatineau, below the Poggen, but FOG is also interested in the entire Gatineau River watershed. And as others mentioned, we're expanding water testing above the low dam, for example. But to keep it manageable, and because there's the most human settlement and activity on the lower Gatineau, we decided to focus on that for this purpose. Next slide, please. So first, a comment about the slides and the titles. I dramatically shortened abbreviated the questions to make these bilingual titles so they would fit on the slides. But the version of this presentation, which is already on our website, has a footnote in each slide with the original full question, so you can see exactly what was asked to interpret the results. So the question for this one was, how often do you depend on the river for the following activities? And we listed all the various activities. So here we can pretty clearly see that the vast majority, so more than 90% of respondents, enjoy the river for swimming and paddling. I don't think that's much of a surprise to anyone. You just look out on the river on any kind of warm day. And also we recently asked Expeditions Wakefield and Cascades Club about how many paddling trips they put on the river each year. And just those two groups alone contribute 25,000 unique paddling trips a year on the river. Pretty incredible. It's also clear from the results that then you jump down to the other activities that many people who also enjoy swimming and paddling, because almost everybody does, many people, 35 to 44%, enjoy fishing, floating, or pleasure boating, pleasure cruising, we called it, floating on a pontoon boat and another motorboat to cruise down the river and hang out in the bay and that sort of thing. And then we have a fairly small number, relatively speaking, between 5 and 13% who participate in higher speed boating activities such as water skiing and tubing and wakeboarding and jet skiing. This paints a pretty clear picture, I think, of the actual mix of activity on the river. But I'd also like to point out that the Transport Canada boating safety project that Rita and Michael Cooper talked about, as part of that effort this summer, we will be doing research, including the call for volunteers that Michael mentioned, to better quantify the recreational activity on the river. Next slide, please. Now, we included a couple of questions about safety and the impact of wakes in the survey. But again, I can't emphasize enough that this survey was about a holistic 2030 vision. It wasn't the consultation for this Transport Canada application that's been mentioned. Now, there are a couple of questions here that are relevant to that and feed into that process, but there's going to be an exhaustive consultation process over the coming months and even year, delving into those problems and solutions. So this is just an initial pulse of how people feel about the river in those regards. So the first question here was, in your opinion, how dangerous is it for river users given the current speed limits, which are 55 kilometers an hour beyond 30 meters from shore? And here we see that over half the respondents rated the safety problem related to the higher speed boating as very serious, and in fact, meaning someone will eventually be seriously injured or killed. And then another 35% rated the level of danger as moderate. And we see 13% don't think there's a danger at all. We also received many, as I mentioned, we've received over 1,000 comments overall. And on this particular question, we received quite a few as well. And including about 100 comments alone that were accounts of serious safety incidents or serious viewpoints on the danger issue. So again, those full list of comments will be available on our website shortly. So if you're interested, you can go into more detail there. Next slide, please. This question was, in your opinion, how much of an impact do boat wakes have on safety and river health? So the first one was more about the presence of high-speed boats, and this is about their wakes and the impact of wakes from boats, both on safety and the shoreline and river health in general. It's interesting to note that a greater percentage of respondents rated the impact of wakes as problematic compared to the danger, the previous question. And that indicates that even people who don't perceive a safety hazard due to boating do recognize a wake impact problem related to erosion and other river health issues. Next slide, please. And then we asked, which actions would you support to create a more safe environment for all river users? And we had a list of quite a few specific measures, different speed limits at different points in the river, bans on different kinds of boats. Given that the Transport Canada process is just beginning, it was probably premature to get into that level of detail on specific measures that might be taken. And again, over the coming months, we'll have lots of opportunity to dig into those during the consultation sessions. But I think it is instructive that a takeaway from this is that first off, almost 3/4 of the people would like to see better enforcement or enforcement at all, frankly, of existing boating laws and greater awareness campaigns. And as we've said, that's in the plans and is starting immediately with the new signage at Farm Point and the other campaigns that are going to be happening this summer. So that's consistent with what we're planning to do and responding to what most people want to see happen. The The other thing that, so I guess the other thing is that while we had various specific speed limits and other measures listed, what we saw from the responses and all the comments was a real mix that, a lot of people had lots of passion around different things. And the takeaway is that, over 3/4 of people selected some kind of speed limit. Not everybody selected all the same ones, but there is a desire that, and quite a few people, some 68% supported a ban on either wake boats or jet skis. At this point, I think that the takeaway again is that people want the situation to improve. And that's what that other project is all about. So again, there's a lot of passion around this subject on all sides, and the consultation process that's coming up is the opportunity to contribute to that in a constructive way. Next slide, please. So we had a question, do you support zero greenhouse gas emissions recreation on the river, i.e. only electric powered boats? And the question was framed in the context of global climate action, where 2030 is an important milestone on the path to the 2050 net zero ambitions. And we think it's important to add emissions from recreational boating to that discussion. And the results show that the vast majority of respondents agree, with almost 2/3 wanting to see a switch to emissions-free boating before 2030, and another quarter, approximately almost, want to see that switch, perhaps over a longer time frame. Next slide, please. In the water quality section, we had the question, in your opinion, how important is the expansion of water testing to include additional pollutants such as microplastics, pharmaceuticals, fertilizers, and road salts? Ronnie and the others already talked about what testing has been done and the plan to expand this already. And this shows clearly, with 98% of people supporting either, very much so or somewhat, that expansion to look at other pollutants. So good validation of the path that the FOG was already on. Next slide, please. The question was, in your opinion, how important is it to reestablish the required 15-meter buffer of native vegetation along the shoreline? I want to point out earlier there was a presentation of the shoreline surveys, or a mention of it, that mentioned a 5-meter buffer zone. And just to clarify, the MRC has a requirement that a minimum of 5 meters back from the water's edge be kept natural with grasses and natural vegetation as a buffer zone. But then the individual municipalities, La Pêche, Chelsea, and Cantley, have all passed bylaws that are stricter, that are 15 meters. So that's where the 15 meter versus the 5 meter comes into it. So here again, we see that the vast majority, in this case, 93% support to some level that that effort be undertaken, that we try and get that shoreline buffer established and reestablished. Next slide, please. So under the invasive species and biodiversity category, we had 3 separate questions, which I put together on the slide. The first question was, in your opinion, how important is it to prevent invasive species from becoming established in the river? As we've heard, we already have invasive species in the river, and we want to, check that where it is and prevent the broader spread and establishment, as has happened in nearby, lakes in the area. So here, 100% of respondents at some level want to see invasive species prevented. So that's consensus. And the second question, again, almost 100%, 97% of people support that boat washing become mandatory and publicly funded boat washing stations become available. This is something that's happening in nearby municipalities everywhere, and water bodies everywhere to deal with the invasive species threat. So that's a pretty strong call to action for governments to move quickly to deal with invasive species. Next slide, please. So this is the last question, which was, what should FOG's top 4 priorities be? Now, not everyone chose 4 items. Most did, but some chose 3 or 2 or 5 or 6. So that, plus the fact that there are 8 options to choose from, meant that the results were spread out. And so I would caution against trying to read too much into the absolute percentages for each one, but the relative ranking is what's quite important here. And we see that clearly the water quality work, which has been FOG's mainstay since day one, is the clear #1 priority to continue that. And then the other areas where FOG is already active have been confirmed with this as the appropriate top priorities. That includes the shoreline protection, education, invasive species, and safety on the water. So that's the end of the presentation of the survey results. Again, they're already on the website with a little more detail in terms of questions, and more detail in terms of those comments will be added shortly. So I'll turn over to Rita now, who's going to sum up the survey results in terms of painting a picture of that 20-30 day floating on the river.
Thanks, Bob, for all your work on this survey. It's certainly what is illuminating to see what people think. It's less anecdotal and more scientific now that, where people are concerned and what people think we should focus on. So I feel that it was a very helpful exercise to help FOG focus on its activities in the future. And in terms of painting a picture, I really wish that I was a painter and that I could actually have painted a picture of what we thought that the river should look like in 2030. But instead I used some clip art. So I am missing the text. Oh, there they are. Okay, sorry. There was some kind of, okay, I'm just gonna go back. So what can we conclude from this survey, and what should we see as targets for 2030? So #1, obviously, is everyone's concerned about the water quality. We need to maintain our level of excellence, one of the cleanest rivers in Quebec, for example. And so all of the factors that play into keeping the water quality at an excellent level is what we should be focusing on. The second most important aspect was about the shoreline protection. And, I picked this little clip art, but really a healthy shoreline is, brimming with native plants and wildlife. To me, these are the indicators of a healthy shoreline. And just last night I was paddling and, counting all of the things that you see in this picture I saw last night. So we want to keep seeing the biodiversity. And of course, trying to get a handle on the invasive species. Now, we know of other cases, lakes are the area where, they've already reached the tipping point in terms of invasive species. It's almost too late to reverse. Now here in the river with the, flow, it doesn't seem to be as bad, but this is definitely an area that we need to be focusing on to prevent us from getting to that point where we've reached the tipping point. So just to continue on with the vision, we would like to see a river where everyone is sharing, all the different types of users are sharing the river safely, swimmers, paddlers, responsible boaters. And so whatever it takes to do that, whether it means that swimmers and paddlers need to be more visible and sailors need to, use some of the river etiquette, and boaters need to slow down a bit when they see the others, some other users coming up. So something where everyone just respects each other and the biodiversity that lives along the river. So, as one of those, wakes are minimized as well. And then, of course, on the emissions side, that most boats are clean, quiet, and emission-free. I did get this picture of this solar boat, but I see that there are quite a few on the market now, but still, I realize that it's an emerging technology at the moment. So with that, I believe that FOG, our board, is now going to go back and build a strategic plan based on this vision. And so again, we'd like to thank everyone who participated in the survey in giving us your opinion. And I mean, conversations will continue as we also have consultations coming up, and as well, you can always contact us using email and Facebook. So just on a closing note, I just want to say that we've been talking about what FOG is doing and should do and so on, but really, it's really a global effort, a team effort. And so if you're wondering what you can do to help, so one of the options is to get more involved with FOG if you like. And so we already mentioned the volunteer requirements that we have up on the website. Also, if you don't have time to volunteer, you can donate, which will help us to, hire supporting staff like translators and printers and things, graphic designers and so on. Also, stay informed about what's happening. We plan to be more active on our mailing list and on Facebook about activities, issues that are happening along the river. So I've put the 2 links on that screen. In addition, whoops, that's not what I'm going to do. I just want to mention that the only way to protect this river is to work together towards a common vision. So, I mean, FOG is one of the active bodies, but there's the municipalities, there's ABV des Sept, of which we belong into their basin, and as well as Ottawa River Keeper. There's various sister groups such as Acre and the Historical Society, Voix Verte, Chelsea, and importantly, all of you, the river users and residents. So what I'm suggesting to you is that you stay watchful and vigilant. Do your part to create a healthy shoreline if you happen to be a shoreline resident. And we have a whole webpage and more material coming about as to provide solutions about your septic and your shoreline regeneration and so on. So there's that's the first thing. If you see problems along the river, I mean, we would like to hear about it for sure, but because we have no enforcement capability, we also suggest that you either call your municipality or the ministère d'Environnement et de contre les changements climatiques. They have a task, inspectors that can be on the spot within an hour of whatever the emergency is, whether it's something funny floating in the river, whether it's people pouring stuff into the river, whatever it is, that's what they're there for. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that those are 2 resources available in terms of identifying and enforcing some of the protection regulations. Also want to mention that this is an election year, and I would really like to have, you know, environmental protection and particularly river protection as one of the campaign issues. So I would suggest that you voice your opinion to your municipal council or the people that are running. Call and write letters in the meantime if there's things that you feel are important, such as, for example, the boat washing station in Farm Point, or whether it's concerns about how close a development is going to be to wetlands or the riverfront or whatever it is. So yeah, it's really a group effort, a team effort that we need here. So those are my closing notes. I feel like we've been talking nonstop, and I think we have a few minutes if anybody would like to start a discussion or ask some questions about anything in the presentation so far. Mark and Ronnie, are there any questions that we should be addressing, or have they all been addressed online?
Yeah, we've dealt with the questions online.
Okay, so is anyone in the audience, would anyone like to speak or ask some questions? This is the time. We can have a discussion about anything you would like. You can if so, you could put a message in chat and we can bring you in. So no questions or no comments? Really? All right, well, maybe we've been going on for too long. So let me take this opportunity to thank the board, first of all, for all their hard work. You can see that we have a stellar team here of not only concerned citizens, but professionals that are working to bring FOG more clarity and move it closer towards our objectives. I'd like to thank all of the volunteers that have helped us, whether it's to set up the website, Anik, who's translating. There's a whole bunch of translators. There's a bunch of people that took photographs and videos for us. There's endless number of people to thank. I also encourage you to contact us to get involved. Based on, you can contact us on the Facebook page and on our website. And we'll continue working together to protect this beautiful gem that we have for many years to come. So on that note, I guess we'll say goodbye to everybody and see you on the river.
Night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. And thank you, Anik, so much for your interpretation. Yay. So we have 11 attendees left. No more questions. Oh, is there a new question?
Not really phrased as a question, no.
Okay.
Yeah, it was